You're going to pay for what you've done.
Rail shooters, or light gun games. Every gamer has experienced this genre at one point or another, whether it's playing classics like House of the Dead and Time Crisis in the arcades, or Die Hard Trilogy and T2, the arcade game on home consoles such as the PlayStation and Mega Drive respectively. These games require little to no strategy, and can be outright unfair when played in the arcade. But regardless of this, they are still good mindless fun to play, either by yourself or with a friend, and no one can deny that playing Time Crisis 2 on co-op in the arcades was a damn good experience. From their early beginnings during the Atari era, the light gun genre continues to be an enjoyable experience on modern consoles. In fact, if you're a huge fan of the genre, then owning a Wii is a must. The Resident Evil series. Sure, later entries in the series, such as 5 and 6, were a little rocky, with 7 bringing the series back to a more survival horror setting, but I'm a huge fan of the series, particularly the 2nd and 3rd in the PlayStation trilogy. Sure, the plot and script is borderline silly, and the voice acting can be downright hilarious at times.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Blood. Hope this is not Chris's blood. Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you. That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich. It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things.
What? There are terrible demons. Ouch! Ouch!
Chris? Stop it!
Wesker, you're pitiful.
I don't have a clue. By the time I noticed something was wrong, the entire city was infested with zombies.
I'm sorry, what? But I love the series. I love the gameplay, the atmosphere, the music. In my opinion, the best survival horror Resident Evil games are on the PlayStation. And although the GameCube remake of Resident Evil 1 is fantastic and probably the most refined and perhaps perfected in regards to gameplay and style, I still love the PlayStation 1 titles more. Yes, it's pure nostalgia and I'm not ashamed to admit it. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what was the point of that long and boring introduction? Well, my friends, what happens when you combine the PlayStation 1 era Resident Evil titles with a light gun game? You get this: Resident Evil Survivor, or as it's known in Japan, Gun Survivor. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, unless you're being chased by giant sentient guns. I personally couldn't wait to play this. Back in the day, I loved Resident Evil 2 and 3 so much that I was so incredibly, stupendously excited to play this. I couldn't wait to play a first-person Resident Evil title. So I rushed home from school, I started it, and the game is set after the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3. The opening cutscene is essentially a recap of the events that led to the destruction of Raccoon City, and then we see a helicopter crash. Oh, some good graphics. It's at this moment we're introduced to our main character, a main character that immediately crashes a helicopter, and then awakens from the crash with amnesia because of course he bloody does. Not long after, he finds this guy from the crash, holding onto some dog tags with the name Ark Thompson, along with one of my favourite bits of voice acting from the game.
You look familiar, but... but I just can't remember.
He doesn't sound like he's in pain. He sounds like he's just been mildly inconvenienced. Where did I put my keys? I just can't remember. Not long after this, you receive a phone call from some odd bloke calling you Vincent. Or as our protagonist calls him, Vincent.
Vincent.
Who is this? Vincent? Who's that? Wait. Am I Vincent?
Vincent, you are a murderer. A murderer.
A murderer? What are you talking about? Answer me! Who did I kill?
Spoilers, but Vincent Goldman is the crazy bastard in command of this Umbrella branch on Sheena Island. You know, killing kids and everything. No, really. Wait, hang on a second. Goldman?
It's me, Goldman.
Before I get too carried away, I should probably talk about the gameplay itself. We'll come back to the plot a little later. The gameplay itself consists of moving around in first person, using the same tank-like controls the series was famous for at the time, complete with having to stop and holding down the R1 button to ready your weapon. However, in this game, you can then move the reticule on the screen before firing, or use a light gun in certain regions. Now, I think enemies have a critical hit area, but I'm still not 100% sure. The game manages to somewhat capture some of the Resident Evil style, but it's very watered down. But you'll still find yourself venturing to different locations, collecting keys, health items, and ammo. Thankfully, your pistol has unlimited ammo, which does kinda make sense since this is a hybrid rail shooter hybrid thing. However, when you acquire other weapons such as the shotgun, magnum and grenade launcher, they all have limited ammunition and require you to scavenge for more, which isn't too bad since you can gain new pistols at varying strength, fire rate and reload speed. You obtain these by choosing between 3 different pathways earlier on. It's a nice touch that adds a small bit of replay value, which is nice given the game's length, although you'll always end up at the laboratory and most notable locations, but the means to which you get there will be slightly different. Now, I'd very quickly like to talk about the graphics, and yeah, they're not the best. They're not the worst I've seen on the system, but they're a little mediocre. Some of the character models are okay, the creature models are the ones that really stand out, and that's only because they've been lifted from previous Resident Evil games. Look at the zombies. They're identical to the models used in Resident Evil 2. They also copy and paste the dogs, lickers, spiders, plants, hunters, even Mr. X. Unfortunately, the one thing that really stands out to me is the animation itself, which is incredibly choppy in places and just screams of a lack of efforts. There are a couple of new enemies though. There's a new boss character later, and we also have these guys known as cleaners. They're the strange monkey men things, and they're commanded by Bane apparently.
Remember your mission! We're doing a clean sweep of the area!
Because that's not a dated reference. But when you kill them, they make like strange panther animal noises or something. They look bland and generic, and that's because they are bland and generic. But because they have firearms, they're beyond annoying. As our hero continues to traverse the mysterious Sheena Island, he quickly discovers that many people seem to strongly dislike him, especially that old man from earlier who not only gives you grief down the phone, but also tries to shoot you. But before he does so, he guns down 2 of the cleaners beforehand. Now, I hope it's because he wanted the honour of doing it himself, otherwise he's just an idiot.
Die, Vincent! Die!
Now, he does have a name, but I'm just going to call him Gruff Jensen. Depending on one of the paths you take, Gruff will try to sabotage your adventure whenever possible because he's a bit of a little shit, including locking you in a room with 2 giant crocodigators.
Die, Vincent!
However, with the help of this annoying child, our hero discovers that he isn't Vincent at all. He's actually Ark Thompson.
You're the detective. Your name is Ark Thompson.
What? Really? I'm not Vincent?
It turns out Ark was sent by Leon S. Kennedy, yes, Leon, to spy on Umbrella by masquerading as Vincent Goldman. Now, this confuses me because neither Ark nor Vincent look similar. They dress vastly differently and they sound nothing alike.
Good boy, Lot.
So then I'm Ark and not Vincent.
So I'm not sure how he planned on fooling anyone. Even the kid here realised you weren't Goldman and tells the real man himself, which then leads to all the chaos on this island. But it must have worked somewhat for Ark to get anywhere near Umbrella HQ. They don't even look similar. Look at them. This does lead to one of my favourite moments of the game. Through a flashback, we're shown Ark approaching Gruff Jensen, and the voice he puts on is just incredible.
Hello, I'm Vincent. I've been transferred to this facility to inspect it. Nice to meet you, sir.
Hello, my name is Mr. Burns. I believe you have a letter for me.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you go undercover or you're supposed to be spying on someone, aren't you supposed to just kind of blend into the background and not, you know, draw attention to yourself? Now, I'm not making fun of people with speech impediments, okay? But when this guy rocks up to me and my friends and he's trying to, you know, blend into the company I work for, and he comes up and says, "Hi guys, my name's Steven," I'm gonna remember Steven because of his voice. Come on! "Hi guys, my name's Steven." Surely this would make his job like 10 times harder. Maybe he just likes a challenge? Or he's just fucking useless. So, just after Ark regains his memory, the self-destruct sequence is activated.
The self-destruction system has been activated.
Because of course it is. Say what you will about 7, but at least it didn't end with a massive explosion. You just shoot a giant oily tentacle monster with a hand cannon and that was it. Before being saved by Chris Redfield, who's now voiced by someone else and looks completely different. Come to think of it, he even has a stupid haircut that looks a lot like... Oh god, no. Maybe he's undercover with the new Umbrella Corporation and he's still just as terrible at it. So, I've already mentioned all the enemies and the one new regular enemy, the cleaners, which are fucking annoying. But I did also mention a boss monster, and it definitely had the most effort put into it, and that is the Hypnos Tyrant, which I'll just be referring to as the H Tyrant from now on. Once he's activated, he kills either Gruff Jensen, the dude in charge of the cleaners, or Vincent Golden himself.
Farewell, friends.
This is decided depending on which of the 3 routes you take very early on in the game. But what I want to know is, how the hell does Goldman survive this? He really does fall a considerable distance. But then again, Ark does just dive out of this helicopter wreck after it's already crashed. I actually really liked the design of the H-Tyrant. It was the one thing in the game where it actually felt like the developers put any effort into it. It has like 3 transformations, and with each different mutation it becomes far, far more intimidating. It starts off looking, well, you know, not particularly intimidating besides the claw, but then as it progresses it just gets really crazy. I love it. Jesus, Final Form, like, you need to make sure you've been saving all of your grenades and or magnum rounds, or you're seriously screwed. What I like about the Final Form is not only does it look like it could just kill you in seconds, but it looks completely out of its mind. It's actually one of the more intense moments of the game, thanks mainly to his movement speed and the clunky controls. It's a moment that really captures the feel of classic Resident Evil. It's everything a final boss fight should be, intense and difficult. But if you continue just stick and move and taking the shots when you can, the H-Tyrant will eventually fall, and then our characters will escape via helicopter.
Hurry!
Seconds to detonation. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But come on now, we all know it's not over yet. Okay. I need you to prepare yourself, because what I'm about to show you is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a video game. And the most ridiculous.
It can't be!
Oh my god, that's fucking awesome. One of my main problems with Survivor is the length of the game. On your first playthrough, you can probably finish the game in under 2 hours, and if you're really good, you can probably finish it on your first playthrough in under an hour. Just imagine how short it is once you know what you're doing. Yeah, I know that Resident Evil 2 wasn't particularly long once you knew what you were doing, but not only was there a B scenario to play after completing the A scenario, which is much longer and far more difficult, but both characters had their own A and B scenarios, meaning you had 4 playthroughs essentially. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but the first time I played Resident Evil 2, it took me roughly 6+ hours to finish the first scenario, and that's because I didn't know where everything was. But in Survivor, the progression is far lazier, meaning that you barely need to think about anything, except decide on the which route to take right at the beginning of the game. And unfortunately, it's just not as fun a game as the others in the series. A game that had potential just comes across as cheap and lazy. But with that being said, I still played this a lot as a kid, and I was quite mad about Resident Evil at the time, so that's probably a factor into it. But looking back, the only thing I'd have got from it on multiple playthroughs was the branching paths, which, in retrospective, they don't really give you enough extra gameplay. It's just a slightly different environment. It doesn't really change the game up that much. If you're not a huge fan of Resident Evil, I'd say give this one a miss. It won't endear you or change your mind about the series. I'd only suggest this if you're a hardcore fan, or you want an excuse to dust off your light gun. There are better light gun games out there, and there are far, far better Resident Evil games. But if you've never played this before, and you've sucked out every last drop of content in the series, then by all means give it a go, just don't expect much from it. So that was Resident Evil Survivor, a game that had a ton of potential, but unfortunately just tripped at the first hurdle, broke all 4 of its legs, and had to be put out of its misery. But maybe you liked the game, maybe you didn't like the game. Whether you did or didn't, comment below and let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you'd like to hear more of my sexy voice. Catch you later. Also, you should totally check out a horror-themed podcast I co-host called Spoils of the Damned. The link is in the description with plenty of content, so do it now before my tracking system finishes and I find out where you live.